On Contact with Chris Hedges.
Welcome to On Contact. Today we'll discuss what a Trump presidency will likely look like with attorney and author Michael Smith.
The Rust Belt, where I come from, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, they all voted for him based on his demagoguery about how he was going to bring jobs back, which ain't going to happen.
On Contact, neoliberalism is patriotism. Truth is not. Socialism, obedience, counterweight, class war, corporate coup d'etat, utopian ideology of neoliberalism, revolt unmasked. On Contact with Chris Hedges.
The election of Donald Trump, woefully unprepared for the presidency, is a massive repudiation of the neoliberal policies of the ruling political and financial elites. It is doubtful, however, that much will change, domestically or abroad. The centers of power in the United States, the big banks and corporations, the security and surveillance apparatus, the arms industry, and the Pentagon dictate policy. Trump, with little experience in government, is unlikely to defy these corporate interests any more than Hillary Clinton. If Trump, as is likely, betrays his base, it will trigger unrest and potentially harsher and more violent forms of state control, especially given Trump's deification of the police and the military. Civil liberties, already severely eroded or eradicated, will give way to a more naked and draconian police state. RT correspondent Anya Parampil looks at Trump's political base.
Donald Trump shocked the world Wednesday morning when he secured the 270 electoral votes needed to become president of the United States. Virtually every pollster in the country predicted a victory for Hillary Clinton, and while she's poised to win the popular vote, she didn't win the demographics needed to push her over the top electorally. So who exactly delivered Trump's victory? First and foremost, white voters without a college degree, rural and small-town voters, and the Protestant, Christian, and evangelical communities. He gained his widest margins with this group by far, winning 67%, 62%, 58%, and 81% of them respectively. These numbers aren't very surprising considering those groups are traditionally bastions of Republican support, but when it comes to gender, things got more interesting. 53% of men voted for Trump, but many women didn't vote for the first potential female president, especially not white women. 53% of them cast their vote for President-elect the Donald. Other groups which contributed heavily to Trump's win but were expected to go his way include white voters as a whole and older voters. He won 58% of the white vote and 53% of voters over 55. When it comes to class, Trump saw his highest numbers with middle-income voters, making $50,000 to just shy of $100,000 a year. And finally, it's worth noting that while the Clinton campaign banked on historic Hispanic turnout, she didn't perform as well with this group as Obama did in 2012. Trump earned 29% of the demographic. What all this means is that many people who voted for Obama 2 elections in a row cast their vote for Donald Trump this time around, especially in Rust Belt states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The Democratic Party must be asking itself how this could have possibly happened.
Thank you, Anya. Michael Smith is an author and New York City attorney who has spent his career representing the poor in poverty law offices in Detroit, Harlem, and South Jamaica, Queens. He has fought internationally on behalf of oppressed groups, including Palestinians living under Israeli occupation. He spent 9 years on the board of the Center for Constitutional Rights and is an outspoken critic of corporate capitalism. He is also the editor of Imagine Living in a Socialist USA. Michael, Trump. Where did Trump come from? How did he get vomited up from the bowels of America?
You know, he's like a fairy tale. He's like this monster that was conjured up. Where did he come from? I think that he expressed the real frustration and anger of a lot of people who were sick of the corporate liberal elite represented by
Democratic and Republican.
Absolutely, and he was smart enough to be able to plug into that. I mean, the guy was a reality TV star, so he knew what he was doing, and he came out with all that demagoguery about Muslims and Mexicans, rapists.
But he also attacked the free trade agreements.
I think that was key. And the states that he won, which had gone over to Obama twice, the Rust Belt, where I come from, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, they all voted for him based on his demagoguery about how he was going to bring jobs back, which ain't going to happen.
And that's the question about, he certainly expressed bigotry and even racism. How large a part do you think that played in mobilizing this base?
I think it played a part, but I don't think it was overwhelming. I think a lot of the people who voted for Trump would get offended if you called them racists. Even though there are some real hardline racists like Ku Klux Klanners and the alt-right who supported him, I think a lot of those people in the Rust Belt, you know, racism in this country is different from what it used to be.
Which is where you're from. I mean, you grew up in that area, right?
Yeah, I grew up north of Milwaukee.
Right.
I worked in Detroit for a while.
Right.
And all those good jobs were wiped out.
Right.
And those people are destitute. If they get a job, it's making hamburgers. So he really knew how to play into that, and he got people to vote against their class interests. It's one of those what's the matter with Kansas scenarios all over again.
So the question is, during a Trump presidency, you still have unfettered, unregulated capitalism on Wall Street, the arms industry, the military-industrial complex, the security and surveillance state. Trump isn't going to mess with any of that.
No, not at all. But people don't know that. It's our job to get them involved in actions that are in their own self-interest, so they'll learn that. And that's not going to happen through the Democratic Party or the Republican Party.
And so what's that going to look like?
Well, I think the Green Party is not that well organized.
No, it's pretty dysfunctional.
But that's one possibility. Jamal Baraka, who ran for vice president of the Green Party, is a friend of mine. I was on the board of the Center for Constitutional Rights with the JAMA for 9 years.
Right.
And he says, this party is out there for you to take over.
Right.
Well, that's a welcome invitation. But if it's not the Green Party, it's got to be something. And it's going to come from people acting in their own self-interest in the streets, hopefully starting tomorrow.
One of the things that seems inevitable is that this sense of betrayal, that legitimate betrayal that led to Trump winning the election, is going to be reignited under a Trump presidency.
Yeah, I think that kind of resentment, which is ugly and scary, is there. And Trump's not going to do anything to quell it.
Well, the question is, with Rudy Giuliani and figures like that around Trump, he may impose harsher, more draconian forms of control, including state violence.
Yeah. Although, and I think you're absolutely right. I think that's probably an accurate projection. But I tell you, Obama didn't do anything to restrain things. They're still killing black people in the streets. Right. They attacked the Dakota Access Pipeline in October viciously with weapons and dogs and rubber bullets, put hundreds of people in jails all across the state. Obama presided over the closing down of the Occupy movement.
Right. Well, he orchestrated it nationally.
Yeah, it came out of Homeland Security and the FBI. He pretended to not be in Washington, but that's not true. And they closed it down in a number of cities simultaneously on the same night. I was there in New York, but they did the same tactics in every city. So the liberals gave us Trump.
Explain.
Because they didn't really address the underlying problems that we Americans have. There was a lot of glitz. Obama's campaign of hope and change. But if you look closely at his rhetoric, it was vapid.
Right.
You could read anything you wanted into it. He was really good at it. And the power brokers who identified Obama early, I mean, when he got nominated to be the head of the Harvard Law Review, there was a New York Times article about that. And if you were paying attention, you'd see that he put all these Federalist Society people on the Harvard Law Review.
That's right, he pushed out all the people who supported him to be the head of the Harvard Law Review.
Yeah, and that was his modus operandi from then on out. When he got to Chicago.
But this gets to the question of astute political figures serve these centers of power. In essence, they're courtiers, to which Obama is.
Yeah.
And Trump, however, has angered the elites. I mean, you saw the Republican and the Democratic elites unite behind Hillary Clinton. You saw the old Republican establishment figures like George Herbert Walker Bush and others,
and his wife,
vote for Clinton. So, what is that about? Is it because Trump is a public relations disaster? What do you think it's about?
Well, I think that on a visceral level, these old line wasps like the Bush family just couldn't stand him. He's a vulgarity. I think on that level, and also, in my view, the government of the United States, whether it's Republican or Democrat, represent the executive committee of the ruling elite.
Well, and they
have to be.
And C. Wright Mills talked about how they, when they're out of power, they all go to the Council on Foreign Relations, and then they go back. It's just this kind of revolving circular, yes. And they all went to the same schools and prep schools and.
Yes, exactly.
But so he's not part of that.
There's a ruling elite, ruling class, if you will, and no, he's not part of that. But the question that I'd like to ask you is, what's he going to do now that he's confronted with them and they're powerful? Is he going to play ball? I think so.
Well, don't you think he has to, because he's so woefully unprepared and knows almost nothing about governance?
Nothing. He's unfit as well as unprepared. It's going to be really interesting to see what this guy can pull together in the next couple of months before he takes over the White House, because he's an ignoramus, and a blowhard and a bully. Personally, he's just really a terrible person who learned his ethics from Roy Cohn.
Well, Roy Cohn, the great lawyer for Joseph McCarthy.
He was McCarthy's lawyer. He presided over the execution of the Rosenbergs.
Right.
He was a really bad guy. One of my good friends from law school actually got his yacht, attached his yacht, because he would buy everything like Trump. He would buy things through shell corporations, and he'd go bankrupt. He was a real operator.
Right.
And she tracked down where that yacht was and who owned it, and she attached it. So she got his yacht. But that was the MO of Trump as a businessman. He just burned people left and right. Let's see if he can apply that to the government. I don't think so.
Great. We'll come back in a moment with attorney and author Michael Smith.
I'm a trial lawyer. I've spent countless hours poring through documents that tell the story about the ugliest side of corporate America. Fraud. Corporate media refuses to talk about these issues.
The conduct by this company was deplorable.
I'm going to paint a clear picture about how disturbing, how corrupt corporate conduct has become in modern America. These are stories that no one else can tell. I'm Mike Papantonio, host of America's Lawyer. Question more.
Earlier today, President Obama
Senate Republicans previously stated that the component responsible for poisoning people in Flint.
There was always hope.
That's what goes on in politics.
What are women supposed to do?
Here's something else we know.
Between the U.S.
Lawyers
and
at
Cuba.
the ACLU have already
Some degree of loss in business.
It's a huge difference.
Following the announcement, oil prices.
Nobody's talking about this story because it's garbage.
Real, genuine, and significant change.
I'm Larry King, and you are watching RT America. Question more.
I'm Governor Jesse Ventura, and you're watching RT America. Question more.
People have got to know whether or not their president's a crook.
The American people deserve to know answers.
What difference at this point does it make?
We must guard against the military-industrial complex.
The Cold War is over.
We shall never negotiate.
An American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima.
To know war is to know that there is still madness. Yet, we do what we must.
The only thing we have to fear is...
I am officially running.
The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted.
What'd you have for breakfast yesterday? Why would you pick those shoes? How fast is your Wi-Fi? What's your dog's name? Why'd you name him that? What's your biggest fear in life? Ever been on a hayride? When's the last time you read a book? What would you say if you ever met the Pope? Who's the best quarterback of all time? What's one topping that doesn't belong on a pizza? Now, I've interviewed you too. Question more.
I'm Tom Hartman, and I'll give you what the mainstream media can't, the big picture.
There's been no charges filed in
And when you question more, you find what you're looking for.
This is the legislative branch of the parliament.
We'll go deeper, investigate, and debate, all so you can get the big picture.
On contact with Chris Hedges. Welcome back. We'll continue our conversation with attorney and author Michael Smith. Let's talk about foreign policy. Expansion of NATO. Reagan had promised Gorbachev it would not be expanded beyond Germany. Obviously, the arms industry wanted those markets. Saudi Arabia, 30% of arms sales, $115 billion in arms sold to Saudi Arabia just during the Obama administration. These endless wars, which have failed completely, creating these failed states. What do you see during the Trump presidency?
Well, actually, Trump was to the left of Clinton during the campaign.
Right.
He didn't like provoking Russia. The United States has troops all the way up to the Russian border.
Right.
And Trump didn't like that. And
well, that was largely driven by Lieutenant General Flynn, who's his advisor.
Exactly. Yeah. And Clinton was really bellicose.
Yeah.
And Trump presented a different image with respect to that. Now, whether or not he has any consistency, the guy doesn't have much of an attention span, so who knows what's going to happen 3 months from now. But at that point, he wasn't as bellicose towards Russia as Clinton was.
But do you think in the executive branch they have enough power to significantly alter that expansionist militarism or not?
No. No, I think that it really drives the economy. I think, what is it, over half of what the country produces is arms, and
right.
And it's the reason that people are so poor. You know, you go to a place like Belgium, and they don't have, or Sweden, and they don't have a huge army and a huge military, and people live better. And in this country, the country has been hollowed out by that.
What do you see now as the role of the left, which I think you and I would both agree collapsed in this election by essentially surrendering to the Clinton machine?
Yeah, they did. You know, the Bernie Sanders question was a tricky one because we all knew that eventually he would turn around and support Clinton, which he did. So we had to be very careful and tell people it's very good that he's talking about socialism.
Right.
And there are a lot of people that identify themselves as socialists in this country. When I did that Imagine book 3 years ago, a Pew poll said that 49% of young people under the age of 29 had a favorable reaction to socialism, and it's much higher now.
Right.
And even with adults. But I think that what we really have to explain to people, and this isn't done very often, is that the root problem in this country is capitalism, and what drives capitalism, where it came from, and how we get rid of it.
Well, let me just interject. It's corporate capitalism.
Yes.
Because there are different kinds of capitalism. There's the penny capitalism in the farm town where I grew up, which is relatively benign. It's farmers selling their produce.
Yeah.
There's even the regional capitalism of the local employer who runs a small factory and sits on the school board. Corporate capitalism is something else and deeply destructive. It disembowels the nation state, as we have seen, something Karl Polanyi understood in The Great Transformation.
That's right. That's right.
And that's really an evil.
Yeah. I mean, it's led, starting with World War I, it's led to that war, and then 20 years later, World War II. And it seems to be not only cumulative, but accelerating. So that in the last 15 years, we've been at war continually. Right now, there are 6 of them going on. And how do you stop that when you have a military-industrial security complex that feeds off of it and that controls the politicians?
And in that sense, you don't expect any change from Trump, then?
No.
Yeah, I don't either.
No. Although, I mean, he's ugly, and I'm worried about things he'll do.
I'm more worried domestically.
Yes,
I think as you get unrest, I don't think the foreign policy, there's complete continuity in foreign policy from Bush to Obama. Nothing except that maybe Obama's even a little worse. I mean, the Democrats gave us Libya, for instance.
Well, they also gave us the Ukraine.
They gave us the Ukraine. You have that neo-con cabal, Robert Kagan, who gave us the Iraq War, now trying to give us a war with Russia. who were around Clinton.
Yeah, his wife, Victoria Nuland, engineered it and bragged that they spent how much on overthrowing the democratically elected government of the Ukraine.
Right.
And now, for the first time since the Second World War, you have fascists in the government.
Right.
The United States did that. But I am worried domestically. There are a lot of things that are scary. Trump wants to deny women the right to control their own bodies.
Right.
He's for the death penalty.
Right.
He was absolutely frightening with the Central Park jogger case when these children were kept up all night and forced to confess to a crime they didn't do. And Trump wanted to execute these children.
Yeah.
Social Security, I think Clinton would have cut it down too, but I think Trump may do that.
Privatize it.
Yeah,
Obamacare,
which is no great shakes.
Right.
What we do need is single-payer socialized medicine, but he's going to gut Obamacare, and what's going to replace it?
Taxes.
Pardon me?
Taxes.
Yeah.
He's going to cut tax rates for the rich.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the guy is bad news in every respect. And what we have to do is put forward demands in a program and a party to organize people into that.
So what do we got to do now? What do we have to do in nuts and bolts?
Well, I think we have to tell people, and when I did the Imagine book, what I'd say was we need our own organization. We can't rely on either capitalist party. They've got two parties and we have none.
Yeah.
And that comes out of action and people working together. And so I think we have to call actions, and there's going to be no shortage of issues for us to grab onto. That's a guarantee. And I think out of those actions and the support that we organize for those, maybe we can pull that and take it to a higher level and make it into a political organization. That's my hope.
So it comes first through movements like opposing the pipeline in North Dakota.
Like that?
It begins there. That's the starting point.
You know, I don't know. Have you had a chance to read the Movement for Black Lives, their platform?
Yes.
It's online. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it is.
That came out of the actions around the murder of all these black people.
Right.
So things are accelerating, I think, here. Historically, I think you could say that you always have simultaneously really bad, scary stuff and also stuff you can be hopeful about. And those things always happen at the same time. And so I think we have to tell people, don't be so demoralized. I mean, for one thing, your supporting Hillary Clinton didn't really matter. And secondly, you can have an effect, but it can't be through their organization. It's got to be through our organization.
Do you think the politics of fear, which is largely the only thing the Clinton campaign had to offer, is that still going to work?
Well, when Nixon left office, he was asked by a reporter, what was the secret of your political success? And he said, unhesitatingly, he said it was fear. It was fear. And they don't teach you that in the Boy Scouts. I think it's a useful tool that's been, historically in the United States, it's been used ever since they killed Sacco and Vanzetti and they killed the Rosenbergs. And I think that Trump has used it very effectively with Mexican rapists.
So was Clinton.
And Clinton, with the Russians have, 17 intelligence agencies tell us that the Russians are hacking into our computers and so on.
And fear of Trump. I mean, it was a fear-based campaign on both sides.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really all they had to offer.
Well, they certainly didn't programmatically. She'd refer people to her website. And Trump, he was like a stand-up act. He had nothing of substance to say. But he was entertaining. You have to grant him that.
But that's all politics, is anti-politics. It's all show business all the time. That's what it is. It's a constant involvement, which we have to really blame the media. I mean, the media created Trump.
Yeah, yeah. And he made his money through putting on a beauty pageant, putting on a Worldwide Wrestling Federation. Well, you wrote about that.
Empire of Illusion.
Yeah, I mean, that was really a fraud.
Right.
That's what he's good at. And he'll continue, I think, the razzle-dazzle in the White House, but I don't think there's going to be anything of substance that's going to change the way people really live. And the other thing that really scares me about him, although Clinton was no good either, but Trump is a real climate change denier, and that's scary, because the clock is ticking.
Right, although I think, to be fair, we have deniers, and then we have the Obamas and the Clintons. Don't worry, we'll all adapt. And I think both kind of views towards climate change are equally ludicrous.
neither one of them had a mumbling word to say about the Dakota area pipeline. Nothing. No, I know, they're both frightening. And Trump, I understand, owns stock in the company that's putting up the pipeline.
Really?
Yeah. But, you know, Clinton was a servant of the banks who lent money to the companies that are putting up the pipeline. So it's not a dime's worth of difference there.
Do you worry among the left that there's just a kind of lack of political consciousness, you know, a kind of poverty of political theory that could cripple it?
Well, yes. I've spent much of my adult life trying to do educational stuff. The Left Forum, the Brecht Forum. I have a radio show called Law and Disorder, which you've been on several times. I wrote that book, edited that book, Imagine. Yes, I think we have to educate people. I don't think it's, they're as sophisticated here as they are in other places. I was in Berlin yesterday, and I had a really high-level talk with the cab driver in English about American politics. You know, it's this population has been dumbed down.
Right. Well, you know, totalitarian states always dumb down. It's all about spectacle.
Yeah.
The totalitarian societies do spectacle very well.
Yeah.
And it's all about emotion. It's about confusing how we are made to feel with knowledge. And the media has been, the corporate media has been complicit in this.
Yeah. Well, they enjoyed Trump immensely because they made so much money from him. They bragged about it. They gave Trump hundreds of millions of dollars in free airtime, and they gave Bernie Sanders 22 minutes.
Yeah. What worries you the most, just to end here?
I think climate change. I think vicious repression. The cops have been militarized.
Yeah.
They look like Ninja Turtles, and they're out there putting down the demonstrations. And I think the clock is ticking. And what worries me is that we're not going to be able to get it together in time.
Right. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for joining me. That was author and attorney Michael Smith. Donald Trump is the product of a political system that has been captured by a corporate cabal. This political system, one the political philosopher Sheldon Wolin calls inverted totalitarianism, uses the facade of democratic institutions, the courts, the Constitution, electoral politics, and a free press to assiduously serve corporate power. The discredited elites in the Democratic and Republican parties united in a desperate attempt to elect Hillary Clinton. But the majority of voters, angered by deindustrialization, austerity, chronic underemployment and unemployment, stagnant and declining wages, and the constant gouging of the citizenry by corporations, revolted. That this revolt is embodied in a wealthy developer and a former reality television star speaks to the impoverishment of our political systems and our celebrity culture. Slogans and images fueled by billions in corporate money have replaced political ideas. Hatred and fear are the primary emotions that fuel public discourse. This anti-politics, which Trump embodies, is made possible because political theater has replaced political engagement and corporate despotism has replaced democracy. Thank you for watching. You can find us on rt.com/oncontact. See you next week.